Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So everyone has a chance to test their audio. Now is your chance to make sure that you can hear everything okay. Hello and welcome. My name is Jessie McClellan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Arborist Association. I'm so excited to welcome you all to this Lunch and Learn with Dr. Ed Gilman. I want to send a special welcome to our Southern Chapter guests as well. Thank you to Skip for inviting the Southern Chapter to join us for this presentation. When I first heard about the new prescription pruning qualification, I immediately had questions about what it is, what people will learn, how do I get it, all about it. And I was sure that all of you would have questions as well. So I went about trying to set up this webinar to answer some of those questions. So I hope that everyone gets all their questions answered. There will be a Q&A portion at the end of Dr. Gilman's presentation. Please put all your Q&A in the Q&A section, not in the chat, because I might get lost in the chat if you do that. So if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we will save time at the end for those questions. Also, if you are here for CEU credit, there will be an opportunity to fill out a form at the end of the presentation. So at some point during that Q&A, I will drop that into the chat. So keep an eye out for that toward the end of the presentation. If you ask me before that, I probably won't give it to you. So wait till the end. I'll give you the CEU link to fill out. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Ed Gilman. Dr. Gilman is the Professor Emeritus at the University of Florida. He is the author of the Prescription Pruning Qualification Manual and Workbook. After decades of research, many publications, books, and presentations, the fruit of the labor and passion from Dr. Gilman can be more clearly recognized and applied in our daily arboriculture practices. Dr. Gilman has spent much of his life and career dedicated to creating longer-lived, sustainable trees in and around where we live, work, and play. I feel like that is a very brief description for a long legacy, as some said in the chat, a legend. So welcome, Dr. Gilman. Thank you for giving this presentation today.
You're going to hand this over to me now, right? Share my screen now.
Give me 1 second to just hand it over to you, and you should have access now.
All right, so question is, can anybody see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides.
All right, very good. So is anyone else besides me tired of seeing this? Poor structure combined with lion tailing. Raise your, I can see all those hands out there. I can see lots of people. There's a couple, there's lots of people raising their hand. Absolutely. And this, which is even more annoying on big trees. This is my neighborhood, not too far from where I live in Jacksonville. Today, I'm hosting you from Banner Elk, North Carolina, where we live for about 5 months a year, up in the mountains here. It was 47 this morning up here. So, but hey, it's somebody's got to do it. So the prescription pruning qualification, or PPQ as we call it, is here to help. Here you see our new logo at the bottom. This was developed by the Florida chapter of the ISA. I think everyone is familiar with the ISA. I'm trying to get rid of my stuff at the top so I can see my slides, but I'll have to live with that. All right, so we can do a better job. Now, here's some pruning that my good friend and colleague and one of the best pruners I work with anywhere, and he has taught me a lot. I have taught him a little. That's what he'll tell you. But here he's on these ginkgo trees. You see one on the left that's really not been pruned at all, and one on the right that's been pruned 3 times, if I'm not mistaken. So you provide clearance and retain or develop strong structure on the right. So pretty big difference there. Envision a HOA or a neighborhood, a street, part of your city, your park, with trees looking like the structure on the right. Sign me up. Easy to maintain, easy to take care of clearance issues, once that becomes a problem for that particular landscape. Very difficult for the tree on the left. You're way behind the 8 ball. Now, instead of lion tailing, what if we showed you how to create this? Here's downtown Savannah, and there are parts of Savannah that have fantastic tree structure for clearance and structural strength. And this photograph is a great example of that situation. Now, here's how it's done. There's an oak tree on the left. You see a cluster of branches about 6 feet off the ground, right above the hard hat. And you see Brian standing over there. And if we were to let this tree grow, you know what it's going to look like in 10, 15, 20 years. There's going to be a cluster of branches there. And to quote Mike Durr, it'd be a meatball on a stick. And that's a pretty darn good explanation of that. So instead, we're going to impose 2 structural pruning on this and transform the plant into an urban compatible architecture that you see on the right. That's 2 prunings over a 10-year period, pushing growth into that lead, creating not only strong structure, but clearance. And if you look at the red line at the bottom, those are the same exact position on this tree. This is the same tree. So we had prepared those branches to come off. You see they're gone on the right photo. We had prepared them come off by pruning the tree on the left. So we spent a lot of time on this approach in our training. So we push growth into that leader by reducing and removing. Here you see on the Virginia Tech campus there, an oak on the left. And then on the right, you see eventually those low reduced branches are removed. And you get a wonderful live oak here in Brunswick, coastal South Carolina. Carolina? Yeah, I think that's Georgia. Sorry, that's Georgia, southeast Georgia, with a single lead up to about 18 or 20 feet, and then the crown canopy starts on the top of that. So clearance is taken care of, and you got great structure there to start. I noticed a couple people from the West also here, the dry parts of the West, join us as participants. And these are some Palo Verdes native tree out that way. And these were removed over time there on the left. So this can be done both for our humid climates east of the Mississippi as well as the drier climates as we go west into Texas and then farther and even drier into parts of Arizona and California. And then eventually we were in Asheville just a few days ago, and I photographed this tree. There's a close-up on the right. When those low branches are managed to keep them small. Now this is starting when the tree is young. You then end up with a tree that's got lots of, or at least several, but small branches on the lower part of the tree. So it's a no-brainer to create clearance when this tree gets older and you require canopy lift or vertical clearance over the sidewalk and or over the street. So it's a pretty straightforward. You've got collars, branch collars to cut back to there if you look closely, and so it's a pretty easy job, and it's easy to specify that kind of work too, removing the low branches. It's a lot more difficult when the tree has not been managed in this manner. So the proactive program that we're going to share with you very briefly today is trying to prevent what you're seeing here, which the close-up on the right really shows you 3 6 to 7 inch diameter pruning cuts there, and not great for the tree. You're cutting into wood that was on the tree when the tree was planted. So we could have pruned at planting, and we should be including specifications for pruning at planting in most circumstances, and we spend at least an hour on that in the 15 hours of training that is this program. So we could have prevented that. What I've found over looking at urban landscapes for 40, 45 years or so is that most property owners in this particular situation, a mall situation, want clearance early, and they don't want wood and low branches in the way. And the best way to do that is to start early with this proactive program. And there's nothing like starting in the nursery. And to quote Brian Kempf, arboriculture starts in the nursery. And here we are starting with an oak and a maple, fantastic early structure, small diameter branches on larger diameter leaders. So this is a great place to start, and we go through specifying and how to specify trees at planting for those states that don't have an organized program like Florida does with our grades and standards. So this is an example of a live oak. Most of us today are familiar with live oak. They're even planted out in California, Corpus Virginiana, in Texas and Arizona and other parts, of course, across the South. Probably 1/3 of the country is familiar with these trees. So here's one that was planted just before I got to the University of Florida, where I was for 30 years, and it was planted in 1984. I arrived in 86. Tree was actually cut to the ground with a brush hog, if you can believe it, when it was about 8 feet tall. And the operator ran over the tree while smoking a cigarette and eating his lunch. A true story. And a couple of years later, we pruned it to one lead. That was 1988. We came back in 92, pruned it again. Here it is 3 years later, 1985. Fast forward, 2 more prunings in 02 and 05. And now the tree is photographed by my colleague, Chris Harchak at University of Florida. Last year, 39 years after planting, 37 years after I pruned it, the tree was 50 feet tall. It was last year. Crown was 85 feet wide, measured, and with a 33-inch DBH. And if you look close there, you can see, hopefully you can see my arrow here. Here's your lead. This is about 15 feet up off the ground, and your lead goes on up into the top of the crown, 50 feet or so tall. So we've got clearance. If this were, say, if I were standing in the street, we've got 15 feet of good clearance. Maybe the sidewalk is on the back side. There's 8-10 feet of clearance there. That's probably good for quite a while. So we know we can do this on our common trees. And gosh, I've been all over the world doing this. So we know it works on a lot of different trees. Switch gears a little bit here in this real brief introduction. Here's a tree as we get older, we can do this on larger trees too, that we've worked for a number of years. This is in California, in Sacramento. And you see the arborist in the upper left photograph up in this area here. So this tree's got essentially a codominant stem here. What you can't see is the poor connection, the crack on both sides of the tree, and targets homes on the other side of this fence here. And here we are 7 years later, 4 prunings, so about every 2.5 years or so. And now you can see that we've created a leader. At least we're on a pretty good course of getting a decent leader. We're suppressing this, and this is starting to take over to fill in where we had removed branches back here over those 4 prunings. So we know we can do this for small trees for sure. And here's a 24-inch diameter tree that we're working. So that kind of gives you a real brief introduction to what we do. I want to explain the program now and the whys, the who, what, when, where, whys. We'll start with the whys. So as an introduction, why are we doing this? Why did we set out to do this? And as we look around, as I look around, I see current practices shortening the life of trees and forcing them to become obstacles in the urban forest. So these low branches especially become obstacles, and it gives us very poor choices as arborists. And so many trees are lion's tailed because of this. We spend probably an hour making sure that we all understand that before we move on through the program. Second, why? Poor pruning practices increase cleanup requirements and clog cities after tropical systems. So the more managed populations of trees, I hear through anecdotal stories, because people call me and email me and text me after storms saying just how resilient the urban forest is. Boy, we need data on this. A standardized, accountable, objective-based pruning practices is lacking. We have a standard. We have the ANSI A300 standards. everyone in this audience probably is aware of that. Maybe some have opened the book and taken a look at it. It's about 6 pages long. So we have a standard, but we don't really have an accountable, and we see very little objective-based pruning taking place that we think is good practice. And that's our fault, really. So we're trying to fill in that void with this program. A large portion of people who prune trees are using out-of-date practices. If you could say that'd be a fourth reason why we did this. And very important, and maybe the most important is this program, you'll see, if you were to go through the 2.5-day program, fosters accountability between tree owner and the arborist. And I'll give you just a little bit of flavor of how that works as we go through here. So the ISA established a pruning committee in July of 2022. And we wanted to focus on various arborists, commercial, residential, municipal, and then urban foresters, consultants, horticulturists, landscape management, and HOA type, airports, DOTs, campus communities. Those are the focus groups for this training. Subject matter expert, the chapter engaged me for this program, and we're still marching forward with it. So let's see, July. So we're about 2 years into this now, and with this wonderful group of people who allow me to call them and bug them routinely during this program, and they've been very patient with me. We have 9, or we will by the end of the year have a total of 9. We've got, I think, 6 or 7. Excuse me just a second. I'm back. Just give me a moment. Anybody want to take a guess what's going on? I have to plug in my laptop. That's not the first time that's happened. So we've got, we'll have 9 instructors by the end of the summer, and we'll be able to march forward with those. Any group, and I'm thinking mostly it'll be ISA chapters that might engage us to come out and run through this program and offer it, would choose among these 9. So they'll be on our website, and you'll be able to see their credentials and so forth. I'll be one of the 9, and you get to choose as the entity to which instructors you'd like. So we call it PPQ. We thought we played around with the wording, and this is what we came up with: prescription pruning qualification, and it is exactly what it sounds like. We've run a number of tests, and we started this 6 months after we started 2022. In December, we had an alpha test. So all that means is we grabbed 25 poor souls from Florida that agreed to sit through this and give us input, and we got lots of input and improved it over about 4 months. We then offered a beta test and brought people in from about 6 or 7 states in April of 2023. Utah, Arizona, Texas, North Carolina, other place, Ohio, 2, 3 of Missouri, 2 other states as well, several other states, and of course, Florida. So we had 70 people providing input. And then went through the summer of 2023, November, launched the program. So November and then January of 24 and April, we now have 250 more or less PPQers, I call them, people that have the prescription, passed the exam, and I'll briefly explain that in a second. We've got October and November coming up. Anybody is welcome to the program in Miami or Tallahassee. Miami's beautiful that time of year. And then the spring of 2025, the Western has expressed interest, so we're in the process of negotiating sites and times and that sort of thing. Jessica from the Georgia ISA has also expressed interest, and then we are scheduled at the Memphis Southern Chapter Congress April 7th, 8th, and 9th. So Skip has put that on the agenda for y'all in Memphis. So we look forward to that. So that's where we are right now with the when. So it's an indoor and outdoor training. There's 2 instructors, and we recommend an academic. So we've got 4 academics and 4 or 5 arborists. So we recommend 1 arborist and 1 academic, total of 2 instructors at each of the programs. That way you get the participation and the experience of both. So it might be Norm Easy and Rob Calley, or it might be me and Carson Smith. Carson's a fantastic climber down here. So anyway, that's how that works. There's 2 parts to this really, or 2 tracks, I guess would be more appropriate. Day 1 only. So that is essentially pruning and not very much about prescriptions. And they get the first part of the manual. We've got a 220-page manual with lots of photographs and lots of drawings, typical Gilman style, I guess you would say. And then the folks then leave, and that's the end of that training for those folks. Anyone can participate. You can bring your neighbor, you can bring a horticulturist that's not certified. It's the day 1, 2, and 3, the full program. That's open to only the certified arborist, ISA certified arborist, and they receive the entire manual, which is full of good stuff that I think you'll be able to use in the process of writing and preparing prescriptions. So the first group, the 1 day only, gets certificate of completion. Then they're done. They don't come back for day 2. And then day 2 and 3 is the prescription pruning qualification part. So we get more into the prescriptions themselves. Once you pass the assessment on day 3, you're a qualified prescription pruner. So here's a brief look at the 15 CEU program. You'll receive CEUs while you're getting qualified. What could be better, right? So day 1, introduction, definitions, probably an hour and a quarter on that. We've got to know what we're talking about. Most of these things come from our standard. Tree architecture, very important part to understand what in Sam Hill we're looking at and how what we're looking at got there. Because if we can understand how the tree got to what we're looking at, then we can understand how to prevent it. We focus a lot on that. Response to pruning cuts, not how to make them, maybe 10 minutes on that, but it's mostly how the tree responds to pruning cuts, not talked about enough in arboriculture. So we do a deep dive there. And then pruning, and we're calling it guiding urban compatible tree architecture. So we don't spend a whole lot of time on non-urban, although it's that's where a lot of us work, is the urban, suburban landscapes. But virtually everything we're talking about, or most things, would be applicable outside of the city, town, suburban environment for sure. Day 2, we introduced the prescription approach. We then spend a lot of times preparing prescriptions. After lunch on day 2, we go outdoors, and the outdoor session is a 2-hour session of looking at typically 3 trees. And then you, as the participant, prepares prescriptions. We would have spent all morning inside going through that process on paper. And then now rubber meets the road. How do you do outside? And the 2 instructors have picked trees before they got there. The first day they got there before the class, and those are the trees that you guys will end up writing prescriptions for. And then we debrief those together, typically inside as a group. And then we finish up with mature trees and palms. Very little bit on palms, maybe 10 minutes or so, because there's not a whole lot to it, to be quite honest. Day 3, there's a review for about an hour and a half. That goes to about 9:30, 10 o'clock. And then a break, explanation of responsibilities of prescribers that pass the exam, and some rules and regulations and that sort of thing, not unlike track. And then the exam is 2 hours, it's multiple choice, 100 questions. And again, 15 CEUs on that. It's a voluntary program. Yeah, the ISA, Florida ISA chapter is just like all the chapters of research and educational mission. No, we have no regulatory authority or intent along with this program at all. So the way, and I know you've got questions, but hold them to the end if you would, because I want to get through, and I think I'll answer you a lot of questions here as we go through. An overview of what this is. We want a dialogue going on, and the first three classes we've done has really worked well this way. I think the working with your neighbor that physically sits next to you in the room, and it could be someone you know or don't know, and you're going to be speaking softly with them during the approximately 30 activities that we do inside on paper, looking at slides and descriptions and scenarios. So it's very scenario based, not unlike the BCMA. So, and we'll ask them, this is how we start. We say, what is the one most challenging aspect of pruning that you think is out there? And we give them about a minute or so. This is the typical screen that they would see, and there'd be a photograph of a particular scenario. And then they would get to speak with each other for a minute or two or three sometimes, and then come up with a solution, and we have a discussion back and forth. So it's a very interactive program. Excuse me. All right, so the purpose of this program is to improve the quality of tree care, introducing a process of evaluating the tree before preparing a prescription, an objective-based prescription. So we haven't pruned the tree yet, and then prune after we have gone through this process. That's the purpose. And how we implement this, or implementing this program, will do the following. It'll improve professionalism for new, and I underlined the word "and," seasoned arborists. Those that have gone through this program that would be considered seasoned arborists, any of the alpha and beta. Actually, many of the folks that have come to our first three classes have been seasoned arborists, and they love the class. So it's we underline that because it does seem to be meaningful to all that attend. Establishes a standardized, accountable, objectives-based pruning process. Accountable is probably the most important part. You as the salesperson in an organization, or you as a municipal arborist in an organization, are going to learn how to prepare a very detailed specification, no more than a page. It's in fact, half a page can do. That's accountable. You can go out and have a discussion with the arborist that executed your prescription, and you can see, hey, this worked really well, or let's make an adjustment here or there. 3, increases the life expectancy and increases vertical clearance of trees. And those are the two main, I think, get a good structure in the tree and provide vertical clearance. Of course, aesthetics are very important too. One model we use is structure, clearance, and appearance. Two of those things kind of rhyme with one another, so it's kind of easy to remember. Structure, clearance, appearance. Those are the 3 things we focus on. And then 4, one of the results of going through this program, it's going to improve your ability to explain what you're doing and why to the owners of the trees and the crew. So they're going to have a better understanding of what you want and why. We spent quite a bit of time on that. We use a lot of deciduous trees because you can see the branch structure, and that is what is so important in getting through this. Very, very difficult to show on slides tree structure because the leaves are in the way. But we do have some trees with leaf on as well, but most of them do not. So the key to pruning can be summed up like this: apply the correct pruning amount on the correct branches to improve architecture and meet objectives. And specifically, we're going to be directing growth on small trees to places in the tree where we want the tree to be in the next few years. We're going to be managing load on older trees, providing a clearance, and then improving appearance. So those are the things that we're focusing. The arborist should be a problem solver. We teach you how to recognize problems. And we call problems conditions of concern. We don't call them defects. The arboriculture seems to be going away from that. It assumes a lot. I think it assumes we know too much. And so we call them conditions of concern. Most of the language we mentioned comes from the NCA 300 and the ISA BNP, with Sharon, Tom Smiley, and I wrote the last edition. I don't know who's working on this edition yet. Quoting your standard, and we focus on this quite a bit, pruning cuts should be the smallest diameter and the least number required to meet the objectives. And man, that's where rubber meets the road. There's a lot of interpretation there, and research tells us a little, but not a whole lot. So there's a lot of learning by examples and discussion and watching how trees grow. You've got to essentially teach yourself how to prune trees, right? But we're sure going to give you a darn good start. So here's the vision, and this is different, is to introduce a paradigm whereby no tree or group of trees is pruned without a prescription. They'll call it a work order, fine, that's fine, there's no problem. You can continue to call it a work order if you like. It's totally up to you. This is a voluntary program. But without a prescription, we don't want the trees to be pruned. So many trees I see where I travel between North Carolina and Florida and the Southeast a lot. The trees are pruned the way the guys pruned trees yesterday and the day before that and last week, not particularly based on a prescription and the needs of that particular tree and that particular customer. So we'd like to change that. The new paradigm, and this is hard for people. It shifts the decision of which branches to prune from the production arborist to the informed prescriber. And think about that. That puts more responsibility on the prescriber, who is, at least in some cases, if not many cases, the person that's gone and chatted with more people, probably the more senior person in the organization, the person that might attend education programs that would keep them up to date with arboricultural practices. So it puts more onus, more responsibility on the prescriber. And the production arborists, and you can see a bunch of them down there. There's two chapter champions in that photograph, Sean Welsh and Forrest McCullough, right in the center there. And they've been on my property a number of times pruning. We do this every year and teach each other things. It's a lot of fun. And what they tell me is, with this approach, they now understand what we want the production guys to do in the tree. And that's the objective. What I've learned working with guys in the field a lot is they're not so sure what we want. So they're going to kind of do what they do. And that may not be what the customer, because they typically, the production guys may not have necessarily spoken with the tree owner. So we, as the prescribers, the salesperson, for example, would have interacted with the owner. So this credential teaches you how to prune trees, and more importantly, or as importantly, how to prescribe it. But it doesn't take away from the production arborist the responsibility to look for things in the tree that they have seen, and you always want to leave that up to the production guys to see if they see cracks, if they see some decay they're concerned about. They might decide to apply a larger dose than you may have prescribed as the prescriber. So I think most of us probably do some version of that, but some training with your production guys as to what are the defects or the conditions in the tree that would lend them to make the decision to take more out of that particular part of the tree. So the goal of this thing is identify the branches to prune. That's pretty straightforward as we teach. To teach, to treat, conditions that concern you as an arborist, and the tree owner also may have concerns, to meet the tree owner objectives. So which branches to prune? What conditions are we trying to correct or address or mitigate? to meet the owner's objectives. Essentially, we teach you how to fill in the pruning prescription form. So if you look at the back of the Best Management Practices 2017, you'll see that the ISA produced. You'll see that this is very similar to their approach. And it's right out of the ISA standard, really. Is what interval, what pruning system will you use? What are the concerns? What are the objectives, therefore, based on the concerns? And then branches to prune based on those first four. And you have the discussion with the owner about those first four in white. We spent a lot of time. We probably do 30 of these prescriptions through the 2.5 days of instruction. So, for example, we typically put the number of cuts in parentheses. And fortunately, the current standard focuses a lot on number of cuts and size of cuts. So here we have 20 to 25, 2.5-inch diameter reduction cuts. So that tells you number and size of cuts, what type of cut, reduction cut in this case. So that's dose, right? Number and size of cuts is dose. And type of cuts, and then where in the tree. So 4 things. So at the end of the 3 largest first order live branches, in other words, branches attached to the trunk. So we go through that a lot. And so you will see that many times. And in your book, we've got, after each of the examples, we've got on the back page, sort of the answer, the prescription that we would have recommended for that. So you don't have to be taking notes if you don't want to. It's really all in the manual for you so that you can listen and interact and participate. That's really important. Ask questions. And also in the standard is any limitations. So, and it's very important. For example, if you as a manager, let's say you're a municipal forester or you're writing specs for an HOA or a mall where there's 80 trees to be pruned, and you don't want those trees lion's tailed, then you can put a limitation, for example, no live removal cuts on any of the trees, or no more than 5, or some kind of limitation, and that is very powerful. So branches to prune is what to prune, and limitation is what not to do. So they're both incorporated in there. We spend lots of time on that. So we got a few moments left here, about 10. So locating branches to prune is straightforward. Typically, it's the first order, in other words, connected to the trunk or leader, branches with a large aspect ratio. So anything over, we typically use the example, any ratios, so over 1/2. So when that branch is bigger than half the size of the leader, right above the union, then that's a branch to prune, typically. We focus on these because they hold the branch most likely to cause concerns. That they overextend, then they're likely to be in the way because they're typically lower on the plant, the bigger branches, typically on planted trees anyway. And remember, branches to prune are not branches to remove. They're branches to either reduce or remove. Very important distinction that we make over and over again. So in this example here, we're going to ask you which has the largest aspect ratio, left or right. So again, the aspect ratio is the size of the branch compared to the leader right above it. So it should be clear. We usually, like this example is pretty straightforward. We'll probably give the attendees 30 seconds or so. And then we go through the measurement, the estimate of this diameter compared to that. That's the aspect ratio. So it should be clear this has got a larger ratio than this elm does, because this is fairly small, probably less than half the size of the leader there. So those are typically branches to prune. We use this tree because it's got it's a pretty nice photograph to show. It's a Gladitsia, kind of works for a large part of the country. and it's easy to see. There's a person at the bottom there that gives you some sense of the size of the tree. Weddings are held under, not a made-up story. They really are held here on a weekly basis during the warmer months. And the natural system is going to be used. The customer wanted the tree to look its natural. And our standard defines, I quoted this because this is what it says exactly. It describes a natural system. I'm not going to go through that here, but it's basically as the tree stands in its current setting. Owner concerns here is to reduce the likelihood of failure, because obviously there's people going to be near this tree on a regular basis. And they want the tree to be there because they really like the whole setup there. So increase the lifespan. So those are the two concerns that the customer has, or the tree owner. Now the arborist condition that they might see is, first, these sprouts are contributing to tree health. So unless there's an issue that inclusions, weakness, no reason to really do anything with those. Second condition of the arborist evaluation, slight overextension of the three largest branches. I've circled the ends there. And there's a dead branch or several. And then the fourth, look at the aspect ratios here in this oval to identify branches to prune. Taking a close up of that. So we're looking at that. Now this takes, for me, by the time I've walked up to the tree, I've got it all figured out. It doesn't take very long to do this after a little bit of practice. So I'm going to look in there and I see that's going to be my lead because it's the biggest way up in the tree by a lot. Here is one branch to prune. It's large aspect ratio. It's pretty large compared to the trunk. There's a second, and we'll show the attendees that, and then we'll ask them which of those three would make a third branch, live branch prune. And so we give them a couple minutes on that, or maybe 30 seconds. I forget what it was, but we've got those numbers usually on the slide to help the instructor along and people. Some people will pick C, but notice it's dead, so it doesn't meet the question up here, which is live. So we go through that, just trying to make people accountable and think more. And so the question is then, is it A or is it B? And B is the largest aspect ratio. So there's the three largest aspect ratio branches. They've got the largest diameter compared to the leader. So those are our branches to prune. Cuts are going to be made on these. This is a large mature tree. They will not be removal cuts. We won't be removing any of those branches. But we are going to be out here making the cuts in the pruning zone, which is out toward the edge. Because remember the objective, increase lifespan and reduce likelihood of failure. And why wouldn't this be a branch to prune? This small aspect ratio branch is very well secured. It's not in the way of anything. So we leave that alone. We leave the sprouts alone. They are not contributing to likelihood of failure. And then they are helping meet the objective of increased lifespan, because foliage on the tree means more wood. And more wood, especially on the lower part of the trunk, means more diameter, more taper, more root system, and therefore stronger tree. Now, if they interfere, there's inclusions on one or two of them, then, or if they're growing up into the crown where they're going to interfere with other branches, then you may consider reducing some of them. All right, I'm out to prune, the hardest part. Most difficult to teach, most difficult to learn, for sure. The approach we take is we use this and a couple of other examples. We want to reduce the likelihood of failure on this overextended branch on this large oak. It's about 80 feet tall over a picnic area along a stream in Central Valley, California. So this is an oak, very long, probably a 50-foot long, with a bark inclusion at the base, like the other side of the tree. So we teach the attendees to look at the foliage clumps they would like to remove. So in this case, there's two in the upper left. It's at the end of the overextended branch. And then use your number of cuts size of cuts and type of cut, typically a reduction cut, and remove the end to minimize the likelihood of failure in this case, because that was one of the objectives. So here are 3 reduction cuts were made in the specified size range. So if we go back here, the goal of the specifier is to calibrate themselves with what size cut will remove those clumps and how many will remove those clumps of branches. That takes some time, and you're going to make some mistakes. Trust me, I've made them. And so it's going to happen, but as you're in this a couple of weeks working with your production guys, or if you're a production person and you're specifying, working with the customer, you're a do-it-all, you know, a one crew operation, you'll get better at this as you calibrate it. A lot of us have not done this before, so you're not expected to be an expert at this right off the bat, but you will get better, I guarantee you. We teach that everyone has a built-in measuring mechanism. There's 1 inch at the first segment, 2 inches and 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 and 6 inches on the other side of the thumb. And so there's no excuse for getting within a 1/4 inch or so of the specification anyway. So there the tree is after the pruning cuts were made in this particular tree. So to wrap this up, the amount we teach is based on many conditions that are there. What is the exposure to wind, the target risk nearby? Is there a target nearby? Those are sort of site attributes. And then tree attributes, low vitality, we'll take it slow, smaller cuts, fewer cuts, or both. And so forth. So we go through that calibration with the group. So with that, I think it's wow, right on time. That's pretty cool. Scheduling, like if you're an entity, I saw there were some folks in Utah and have been out there in the last year or so, Salt Lake City and parts of Arizona, Phoenix. When you guys are ready out there to schedule it through your chapter or through another entity, it doesn't have to be through a chapter, then let Lori Ballard know. There's her email right there, lballard@floridaisa.org. Or if you're an individual, like to sign up for our Miami course coming up in October, or the April 7th, 8th, and 9th in Memphis, in coordination with the Southern Chapter Congress in April in Memphis, let Lori know as well. And she told me yesterday she'll be keeping a list. And then when we have the information to sign up ready, then she will email you, let you know. So those are the ways to kind of keep in touch with it. So with that, I will hand it back over to our lovely host, Ms.
Thank you,
Jessica.
Ed. We did have some questions, and we have some time for questions if you don't mind answering a few.
Sure, you bet.
So if you guys have questions, drop them in the Q&A and I will read through them so that we're all on the same page. The first question is, how does the manual compare to the 3rd edition illustrated pruning book?
The 3rd edition of Illustrated Guide to, well, first of all, it's a manual. It's a true manual. So I don't know which is first of all. I wrote the Illustrated Guide to Pruning 3rd edition in 2010. And I've learned a lot since then. And this is focused on the training. So you'll see the same exact photographs and exercises, you know, in the book that you'll see on screen. And so it's really written around the PowerPoint slides. So, you know, there's 15 hours of training. We keep it active, we keep it light so that and interactive, and so we're speaking with each other, so it's not just a preacher up there, right? But yeah, it's updated, and so the brain has been working the last 12 13 years, and we've learned a lot as a profession, I think, too. So that's incorporated in there as much as possible. Yep.
Will it be offered in different language? And if such programs are under development, when would we expect them to roll out?
We're trying to get through the English now, you know. I mean, it's early. We do, in fact, we have a committee meeting this afternoon in about an hour, a pruning committee meeting. And on the agenda is Spanish translation. So that'll probably be the first. We've got 3 or 4 volunteers. I think they're volunteers that are in the arboriculture industry. I think all of them in Florida. There might be one out of. And then Southern Chapter, Alabama, Auburn. What's his name? Yeah. Somebody knows. Spanish from Guatemala, Spanish speaking. Can't remember his name. I think he said he would review it. So that's, that's where that's probably Spanish will be the first, but don't know when. It'll be late 25. It's something like that. I don't want to make any promises sooner than that. It's a big challenge, as you might guess.
Is there a renewal requirement? How long will the qualification last?
We don't know yet, is the answer. So we've gotten that question a lot, and right now there isn't, but we haven't made a decision on it. We haven't said there's not a requirement for renewal, but we haven't said there. We just haven't decided yet. So any input on that would be welcome from anybody here or anyone you might know. We would welcome your comments on it. Really would.
Can people order the manual without taking the class? And if so, how would they do that?
Yeah, good question. No. That's the answer. So it's not like Illustrated Guide to Pruning 3rd edition, which is more of a textbook, honestly. I don't know who buys the book. The publisher doesn't tell me, but I think a lot of it goes to textbook sort of courses in college. This one is really focused around the training in particular. So it's just a different book. It's kind of like follow the dancing ball or something when I was a kid. So it's very focused on the training itself.
Do you anticipate it being adopted by the ISA?
Oh, I have no idea. Yeah, this is strictly a Florida program, and that's our focus right now. And we have we were offering it to the Western chapter. And then Georgia's talked to us, and we've already scheduled with the Southern. So we'll see how that goes, and just take it one step at a time.
From a chapter perspective, in my opinion, the more chapters that offer the class and recognize it, the more the ISA won't be able to ignore it. So I think that it's important to try to get it in your area. Will the course include practical experience making pruning cuts and climbing, or is it mostly classwork with hypothetical situations?
Well, they're all real situations. So there's a few illustrations, but the photography is mostly mine from around the country. There's a few European examples of trees that we've been pruning, in many cases over 30 years. In some cases, 3 or 4 prunings, showing the follow-up for those, a year, 2 years, 8 years, 10 years later. And the people that have attended tell us that they really appreciate that. And I know some of you out there listening right now have been to some of my workshops, and it's similar to how I present those scenarios. Of course, we've got a lot more. And then others like Brian Kempf and others have shared their extensive experiences as well. So having said that, we will be offering an all outdoor day, at least a day. We're going to start in Florida. It's going to be most likely either Clearwater or Orlando, both easy to fly to, where it's all pruning outside. Now, there might be a half hour inside to get started, but only for people that have the PPQ qualification, passed the exam. So that's how we're going to handle there's just so many logistics. We spent so much time in 2022, so much time trying to get the outdoor, to prune some trees during the class. And, I'll start with the weather. I'll start with the added expense, because there's just everything, more setup and the cleanup, and there's just so much. And we tried really hard and ended up with an outdoor exercise for a couple of hours where we write prescriptions. So yes, sort of, but it's going to be after the qualification. That's how that's going to be.
What is the cost estimate for the course?
Similar, we tried to keep it into we did keep it in the same realm of track. I think most chapters have now gone up to or near or a little bit over 700 for a track. And so we're at upper 600s, probably 675 in that neighborhood for the 2.5 days. So comparable. It equates to about $180, $190 a day. So about a 20%, 25% premium on CEUs per dollar. If that makes sense. Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand this question, but would the Florida chapter offer 2-day training with exam? I guess that's asking what trainings are upcoming.
Okay, well, the training is, so there's two tracks, so to speak. There's the 1 day only, just pruning. We don't get into prescriptions. We show the attendees a prescription because these folks, in many cases, work for the prescribers. They work in that group in their company. So we'll offer that we'll do that in Memphis, which is scheduled. And then the other is 2.5 days. So we go through, the prescriptions over those 2.5 days. And then again, to reiterate, we offer the outdoor session sometime later. How that's going to work out of state, it's probably going to be very similar to what we're doing in Florida. The outdoor 1 day afterwards would be, somebody would come back, one of the instructors would come back, and we probably only need one, maybe two. I don't know. We haven't worked that out yet, but it's something we'll discuss shortly. And we'll run the outdoor session, at a nice site that's got lots of small, medium, and large trees, so we can do a real variety of things. So, I wish we could. And the other thing was, if we did an outdoor session during the qualification, it would add another day, and then the cost would go to $800-900, and we weren't comfortable with that. So we're kind of breaking it up into two, if that makes sense.
I
Ask
think
that
that
question.
I think they were wondering without the exam. Would you offer the class without the exam?
Oh, well, I'm essentially doing that in Ohio in a few months, coming up October 18th and 19th. So, I mean, that's just part of what I have been doing for a long time anyway. But yeah, it's going to be indoors, outdoors, like half and half for 2 days. So, I mean, I just do that myself, but it won't be part of the qualification.
Do you know why the ISA rejected this qualification initially?
Oh, no, I don't.
All right. Any more questions? Now is your chance. I am going to, in the meantime, I'm going to drop the link for the CEUs in the chat. We have, 4 more minutes scheduled. So if you have questions, ask them now to get them answered. Otherwise, reach out to your chapter leader, your executive director, and ask them to bring Ed to your state so that we can adopt this as widely as possible.
Well, remember, we've got 9 instructors. So, I mean, I would, if you choose me, you would also choose an arborist. So that'll be pretty self-explanatory up on our website. And we've got Ryan Klein, University of Florida, wonderful instructor. All the guys we picked have gone through rigorous training. Trust me. Lindsay Purcell is going to go through the training in September here up in Banner Elk with me, kind of a one-on-one. So he'll be in the mix, and he's a wonderful instructor. So there'd be a large number of people to choose from, 8 or 9 of us.
If you missed the first part of this presentation, there will be a recording that I will email out to all of the people who registered for it. It will be on our YouTube channel. So if you wanted to go back and review a portion of it, you will have that opportunity.
Oh, cool.
I dropped the code in the chat, but I will do the link again because sometimes it can get lost. So just click that link, fill out the form, and I will have the CEU submitted to the ISA for you. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, Ed, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you giving this presentation to us, and hopefully we will see you in class in the future.
All right. We will talk later. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate y'all coming. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.